President Trump's trade wars affecting America's ports. Container shipment bookings are down nearly 50% from a year ago. The executive director at the Port of Los Angeles has warned that shipping volume from China will plummet this week. He joins me now to discuss. In just 1 year, US sorghum exports to China have collapsed by more than 94%, plunging from 1.44 million metric tons to a mere 78,000. This isn't a seasonal dip, it's not a supply chain hiccup. It's a catastrophic collapse in one of the most critical agricultural trade flows between the United States and its largest former buyer. And while it may sound like an issue for farmers or freight companies, the impact goes far deeper, touching everything from rural livelihoods to the stability of global markets. The scene opens on rows of rusting shipping containers, sitting motionless at the port of Oakland. They're filled not with goods in transit, but with perishable crops. Sorghum hay almonds abandoned by cancelled contracts and prohibitively high retaliatory tariffs. In the distance, the machinery meant to drive agricultural output sites idle collecting dust. The camera cuts to a field in the Midwest. A single farmer stands motionless beside a harvester that hasn't moved in days. The land is ready, the crop mature, but there's nowhere for it to go. No market, no buyer, no price that justifies harvesting. This isn't just the result of a volatile market. This is what it looks like when policy decisions made in Washington dismantle the foundations of American agriculture. When global trust is eroded and long-standing trade relationships unravel overnight, the damage doesn't begin in the field. But it ends there with silence, stillness, and losses that no subsidy can fully cover. At the Port of Oakland, one of the West Coast's busiest agricultural gateways, activity has slowed to a crawl. Shipments of American-grown almonds, dairy products, hay, and eggs, once exported in massive volumes to Asia and beyond, have dropped dramatically. The cause isn't drought or labour strikes, but a breakdown in global trade relationships and a surge in retaliatory tariffs. Where there were once steady flows of outbound containers, there are now idle cranes and unopened gates. Export contracts are being cancelled at the last minute, especially by buyers in China and Southeast Asia, who cite prohibitively high costs after the imposition of tariffs exceeding 125% on certain US agricultural goods. The increased trade friction has made American products uncompetitive, not because of quality or demand, but because foreign buyers are now penalized simply for choosing US suppliers. As a result, the port is struggling with a backlog of stranded goods. Storage and warehousing fees are piling up, driving costs even higher for exporters. Some shipments, especially perishable ones, are simply abandoned. Producers and freight companies facing untenable losses are walking away from contracts rather than absorbing the cost of tariff storage and failed logistics. These aren't just delays, they're symptoms of a system grinding to a halt. For farmers and exporters, this breakdown in trade infrastructure is devastating. Crops are ready, products are packaged, but the outbound lanes are closing. What was once a reliable economic engine, the flow of US agriculture to global markets is now frozen by policy-driven paralysis. And for every day those ports remain underutilized, the pressure builds on storage systems, on pricing, and on the people who once depended on these shipments to make their living. At the center of the unfolding agricultural collapse is a trade strategy built on confrontation and one that has dramatically backfired. In 2024, the US administration under Donald Trump reinstated and escalated a wide range of tariffs, including imposing up to 145% duties on key agricultural imports and exports. These aggressive measures were aimed largely at major trading partners like China, with the goal of forcing renegotiation and bringing supply chains back to the US. But the outcome has been far from that. Instead of folding under pressure, China responded by cutting back dramatically on American imports, particularly in agriculture, where it has now restructured its grain and feed sourcing toward Brazil and Argentina. These countries have not only filled the gap left by the US, but have expanded their market share, sometimes permanently, as they offer reliable exports without the threat of political volatility or economic retaliation. Meanwhile, the World Trade Organization WTO, long a neutral platform for resolving trade disputes, has been rendered ineffective. The US has blocked the appointment of appellate judges, effectively paralyzing the organization's ability to rule on tariff violations, MARs, or enforce agreements. With no trusted mechanism for arbitration, nations have turned inward or sought bilateral trade deals that bypass both the WTO and the US. The European Union, facing its own tariffs from the US on steel agriculture and manufactured goods, has increasingly looked elsewhere, signing trade agreements with countries like Canada, South Korea, and Japan to diversify its supply chains. This has eroded US access to global markets even further as long-standing trade partners begin to see American policy as unpredictable and high risk. In attempting to weaponize trade policy, the US has undermined its own export base, pushed away reliable partners, and lost ground in key global markets. This wasn't just a tactical misstep. It was a strategic error that reshaped the global agricultural map, leaving US farmers excluded from the very markets they once dominated. As tariffs disrupted international trade flows, the secondary effects rippled through the logistical backbone of American agriculture. From ocean freight to insurance to container handling, every layer of the supply chain has absorbed shock and passed it along in the form of higher costs and longer delays. Shipping fees have surged as vessels from major exporting countries, especially China, are subject to massive port charges. Under new federal provisions, Chinese cargo ships face port access fees of up to $1, $5 million per vessel, creating a chilling effect on import-export volume and making routine trade routes prohibitively expensive. These measures aimed at asserting control over strategic shipping lanes have instead strangled commercial traffic and raised costs for American exporters who depend on inbound materials and outbound access. Insurance premiums have followed suit, with trade underwriters recalibrating risk models to account for rising tariff uncertainty and geopolitical exposure. Added layers of inspection, customs, paperwork, and certification delays have further slowed the movement of goods, especially for perishable or temperature-sensitive exports like dairy meat and fresh produce. Perhaps most critically, the containerization model, which revolutionized global trade in the last century, is now a major vulnerability. An estimated 55% of the value of US agricultural exports depends on container shipping. When those containers are stuck rerouted or priced out of competitiveness, the entire supply system backs up. Farmers and exporters are left holding goods that cannot move, while buyers abroad turn to more stable sources. The combined effect is a logistical chokehold. American producers are caught between rising production costs at home and a shrinking ability to reach buyers abroad. What once was an efficient globalized trade infrastructure has become a liability, slowed by policy, stranded by tariffs, and cracked under the pressure of economic nationalism. As America's agricultural export system fractures, the pain is not shared equally on the ground. Family farmers and small producers are absorbing the full impact, while large agribusinesses, many with lobbying power, diversified portfolios, and global subsidiaries continue to post profits. Companies like Calin Foods, with the infrastructure to pivot between markets and hedge against supply shocks, remain profitable even as thousands of farms face insolvency. At the farm level, the situation is grim. Input costs for seeds, fertilizer, fuel, and feed have surged, while selling prices for key crops have fallen due to oversupply and evaporating foreign demand. The math no longer works. Many farmers now face the bleak decision to leave crops in the ground as harvesting, storing, or transporting them would only deepen their losses. Fields are left untouched, not due to weather or labour shortages, but because the market has stopped making sense. The broader consequence is a sharp decline in overall farm income, even as consumer food prices rise nearly 18% year over year. This contradiction, falling revenue for producers alongside rising costs for consumers, reveals a system out of balance. Middlemen and logistics firms may buffer or pass along costs, but the ends of the supply chain are suffering: the ones who grow the food and the ones who buy it. Behind every foreclosure notice, behind every UNH harvested acre, is a breakdown, not just of economic efficiency, but of trust in markets, in institutions, and in the idea that hard work and production are still rewarded. The trade war's domestic legacy isn't just disruption, it's disillusionment. And for many farmers, that's a loss far deeper than any tariff can measure. Beyond the financial strain and broken markets, a deeper crisis is taking hold in America's farm belt. The collapse of trust. Farmers across the country are no longer just frustrated.